Sutta Nikaya, a sutta called Walking.
Walking.
And it just says, if a sensual thought or thought of ill will or cruelty arises while walking, and if you tolerate it and do not abandon it, then you are devoid of effort and moral shame, constantly lazy and lacking energy while walking. And it goes on, whether walking, standing, sitting or lying down, one who thinks bad thoughts connected with household life has entered upon the wrong path. Infatuated by delusive things, such a person cannot be free, but one who has his thoughts calmed and delights in stilling of thought, such a person can be free. So there's a lot of walking meditation out there people like to do, but they focus on the feeling of their feet on the sand.
Yeah. Not the actual nature of the thinking.
Yeah, which is quite common. And that's, walk from this point to that point. How many steps? 30 steps.
Same for any body posture, when they're sitting. Well, when the Buddha says he's upon the wrong path, means he's going down the wrong direction. That's what it means in a most accurate manner. So going down the wrong path, it's basically attending to things wrongly, and means going down the wrong direction of your efforts. So even the ones who are making the efforts, and that's exactly the example you gave when when you're doing walking meditation. Mostly today, people again, you're after an experience of peace or some sort of factual. You're after experience of peace or some sort of experience of some novelty or the other, but not many people would use the meditation to reflect upon the nature of the thoughts. Yet that's all the suttas talk about. As anything that really matters is to not entertain the unwholesome and to cultivate the wholesome, whether you're sitting, walking, lying down or standing, whether you're talking, whether you're alone or with people. But yes, unfortunately today you get this like a mass group retreat centers and so on, and then you get taught like for walking meditation you observe the soles of your feet and you try to like be as present as possible and catch the moment and so on. All that is nothing other than just a focusing practice on a particular aspect of your body, on a particular basically type of perception of touch. That's it. And it can be so. It can produce a release for people because most of the rest of the time they spend their day in an unmindful state, very busy, very engaged, and then just focusing on one particular thing and refusing to give attention to everything else seems like a way to go because it provides you with a degree of peace. But that peace is only relative to your lifestyle beforehand. That peace is not the measure of your understanding and wisdom that comes if you do the Dhamma correctly. And it's not a hard thing to see that. Just see when you're out of the retreat, how much of your composure you can keep when you go back to your daily life, to your other things, dealing with things, whether you'll still be able to remain impenetrable to the unwholesome states as you're walking, sitting, lying down, or standing. And most people won't. That's why they have to keep going back for retreats, prolonging retreats, doing longer retreats, more intense retreats, all that.
But then they say, well, if I focus on my feet, walking on the sand,
right,
then I don't think any sensual thoughts.
Well, that's the thing. Where you focus is not the root of the problem. The root of the problem is not understanding the nature of unwholesome, and because of that, being subject to it. Because you don't know how, even unwittingly, you entertain it, you fuel it, you feed it, which means you end up acting out of it. So, think of unwholesome thoughts as a problem. Then proliferating unwholesome thoughts are a further problem. So what happens when people do the focusing practice, they would focus on one particular thing and refuse to give attention to everything else, including the problem of unwholesome. So then they can feel like, yeah, this is really working. And I mean, I'm not saying there's absolutely like no benefit whatsoever, but I'm saying that benefit is only relative for those who are distracted most of the other time. Distracted with duty, with family, with sensuality, or just with your views in some cases. So the point is to recognize that not giving attention to the problem can help you, but that's not solving the problem. That's just managing it, dealing with it temporarily. And that's exactly the point. You can practice and further this type of focusing meditation only in such retreat settings. You can't sustain that out in the world, or you can't sustain that if you have to climb up and down the mountain every single day for Pindapat for 5 kilometers in rain or whatever else. You can try, but you're going to burn out very soon. As you see many cases that we both kind of witnessed, with the monks who would go in the great seclusion, focused on some sort of technique to do it, and then just after a week or two, you can't handle it anymore. You need something. You need some reference point, because okay, now you stopped attending. You're just focusing on one thing, but that's it. That's a wall. That's a dead end. So the only benefit you were getting before from your meditation practice wasn't because of what you were focusing on, is because of what you were not focusing on, which was the unwholesome. You were not focusing on unwholesome. That was the peace you were getting. Now you arrived at not focusing on unwholesome because you were focusing on something else, which sooner or later environment will prevent you to do so, or you're just going to run out of the most obvious inspiration to do so. And then what you're going to do, you're just back in the same unwholesome, which remain intact, because you haven't been understanding it, discerning it, resolving it. You've been ignoring it through watching the soles of your feet, through watching the tip of your nose, and so on. So that's what I mean. Nobody denies that people can experience peaceful feelings when they do focusing meditation, but the point here is that won't result in uprooting the problem. It's only covering it up.
It'll be the same.
You can only uproot the problem if you start looking at it for what it is directly. And that's exactly what the part of the sutta you read just talks about. So that's where you recognize the work is not about me doing walking meditation for 8 hours a day or focusing on my nostrils all the time. The work is recognizing whether the mind is affected by ill will, affected by greed, affected by delusion, affected by unwholesome states, and then not entertaining that. Doesn't matter whether I'm walking, sitting, lying down, or standing.
Yeah, what posture?
Yeah, the posture is your reference point that you don't need to interfere with if you know where the problem is. And the problem is mind affected by unwholesome. So indeed, sometimes when it's just too much to deal with, yeah, just ignore it. Just don't pay any attention to it until it calms down so that you can go back to it and deal with it. But adopting a practice of just constantly not looking at the problem and focusing on something else as a way of release from the problem, it's not going to resolve anything, because there's absolutely no discernment there, no wisdom, no understanding, because you're not looking at it.
Distraction.
It's a form of distraction. That's why the Buddha did say when he gave that similar, he says, not being free from sensuality. These samanas and Brahmins, they premeditate, mismeditate, overmeditate, undermeditate, but they don't meditate. And he gives the simile. He says they are like an owl hunting for a mouse, or a cat waiting to pounce on a fish, or similar. Basically, similes of preying upon something, of focusing on one moment where you act, where you catch it, where you grab it. And he said that's meditating with sensuality. That's looking completely down the wrong path. So that's, again, just imagine yourself preying upon something. You're waiting for, I don't know, a mouse to come out of this hole. You mustn't skip a beat, because he might escape you. And see whether that's different from when people try to not skip a beat when they're observing the soles of their feet, or not skip a beat when they're focusing on the nostrils, or the belly movement, or whatever. You end up cultivating the same attitude of preying upon something that you clearly think has value, that's going to resolve all your problems. Catching this mouse will fix all my problems. Catching these perfect moments that come and go in front of me will purify my mind. But that's a completely, he said people who meditate like that meditate with sensuality. That's why they premeditate, mismeditate, overmeditate, undermeditate, and so on, but they don't meditate.
So as you're walking, a thought of cruelty arises, and you don't tolerate it, which means...
Yeah, which means you don't, like, thought of cruelty arises, means there's your work there for you in its entirety. Thought of cruelty. That's the problem, nothing else. So you don't stop everything you've been doing. You like just give it all up because I will never. I don't want ever to have such thoughts again. You can't do that because it's not up to you. Those thoughts will be presenting themselves. So in order for you to not be victim of those presentations of ill will or sensuality, you need to understand how you engage with them. And you want to understand the habits of your engagement with those thoughts while they're simultaneously present there. If your sole response to that is look away, it's just look away, just ignore it, just consider my breath, stop thinking about it. And on top of that, you're going to wind yourself up much more because thinking that you must stop thinking is another thought that you're thinking in order to not think. So that's why it becomes so intense and sort of unpleasant.
As soon as you have the thought of, say, cruelty, you recognize that.
You recognize the thought of cruelty.
But then it stops.
In a way, that's enough, very often. Sometimes your recognition might not be clear enough. So then you need to endure it. You have to recognize how much of the thought arises on its own. And then you have to recognize where the line is, where if you cross, then it's you doing it, you entertaining it, you getting involved with it, you trying to get rid of it. All of those are ways of fueling the thought, including you actively trying to ignore it. Why would, there is a thought in I must focus on my soles of my feet. Why? Because you're trying to avoid the arisen thought in your mind that you think you must not have. And by trying to avoid things that are disagreeable to you, what are you doing? You're doing exactly the thing you shouldn't be doing. Acting out of craving in regard to how you're feeling. There is the unpleasant feeling, get rid of it. There is the pleasant feeling, I must have it longer.
Well, there's a recognition that this is a cruel thought.
Exactly. That's not your doing. The cruel thought presented itself, it's a cruel thought.
Yeah, it's not mine, this is a cruel
It's
thought.
like somebody comes right here in front of your door. And this is a public space. Yeah, your kuti is yours, they can't come in. But they have every right to stand in front of your kuti. But if you feel affected by that, that's on you. So if you come out of your kuti and start to chase them, well, now you actually went into something that's not your domain, not your ownership, and trying to control it. Which then means you left kuti unattended, and then other things can come in. Because you're everywhere and nowhere. And in the same manner, the thing cannot come in. Whatever thought is, unless you invite it in, unless you drag it in. And that's what happens with sensuality. Either sensuality, as in agreeable desire, or disagreeable, something you want to get rid of, it just comes in front of you. But if it's agreeable, you are the one who brings it in. If it's disagreeable, you are the one who goes out and tries to chase it. Either way, you overstep your boundary. And because of that, you're subjected to it. And that's why you're affected by it. So that's what there's that another sutta where the Buddha did say, while he was still unenlightened bodhisattva, when he was in it's called Fear and Dread, Majjhima Nikaya, where he said he'll be staying in this frightening forests and groves with wild animals, and then he would be doing walking meditation at night. And he said if he would hear some sound or something, or have a frightening thought, he wouldn't change what he was doing, which is walking meditation. He wouldn't stop walking. He wouldn't stop walking until he dispels that unwholesome state of mind. And then he might change the posture. And in the same manner, whether he was seated, standing, sitting, or lying down, he wouldn't change the posture unless he first removed the unwholesome state that had arisen. And you remove the unwholesome state by not acting out of it, by not trying to get rid of it, by not trying to prolong it. And that's exactly what it means. I wouldn't change the posture until this state is dispelled. Because if the unwholesome state came up and now he stopped walking and done something else, means he acted out of it. And that's already a way of fueling it. Whether you acted out of it in the forms of trying to prolong it, as in unwholesome state of sensuality, or trying to deny it, get rid of it as quickly as possible, as in unwholesome state of ill will or fear or anything disagreeable. So the point is you recognize, and then how much of it arises on its own, and then you don't either add to it or take away from it. And when it subsides, then you change the posture.
So if you do that long enough?
If you do that long enough, no matter how subtle ways of fueling the unwholesome states of your mind you've been entertaining, they will all fade. Because you're uprooting it left and right. Bit by bit by bit. I mean, you can uproot things, but it takes time for them to sort of wither and die. But one thing for sure, they'll never wither and die, and you certainly never uprooted them if you keep looking elsewhere. If you keep focusing on your nostrils for the sake of avoiding the thought and not having to think about anything and not having to experience displeasure, if you keep focusing on the soles of your feet because you're trying to catch a perfect moment and develop this ultimate peace, they will never be disturbed. The non-disturbance doesn't come from not experiencing disturbing things. Non-disturbance comes from not being disturbed by the disturbing things. So for as long as you're concerned with the disturbing things, not with your response in regard to the disturbing things, you're looking in the wrong direction. You are down the wrong path.
Distraction being everything. Distracting some work,
Sure.
through work,
Yeah.
through study,
Yeah.
through meditation techniques,
Yeah.
playing games.
Something to do, basically. You're focused on doing things, on staring at things, on perceiving things, on observing things, but not looking your attitude behind that, the intentionality behind, the motivation behind, the craving behind. Craving is always behind. It's always in regard to. So if you never look in that direction of that background, you're never going to see it.
Because again, there's these ideas that by being in a particular posture, cross-leg, lotus position, back straight, spine erect, loosened, loose belly, and all these posturings, that doesn't do the work for you, but it's a game that you play to distract yourself.
It's a little
from
ritual,
the actual
little motions you go through to create the significance of what you're about to do. Because if you just sit down, stare at the wall, or look down the hill, and contemplate, why do you suffer when you can't fulfill your desires? Or why do you suffer when you experience something disagreeable? Why do you suffer when you're paired with things you don't want? Why do you suffer when you're separated from things you want? Yeah, there's not much to it that you can perform, and it's for many people it's almost just abstract. So they need something more palpable, which is on a level of sort of mechanical performance, doing things with your body, particular posture, particular way of walking. I must be stepping on the outsides of my soles of whatever. I can't be walking like this. I must walk slowly. I can't walk fast. All of that is being concerned with a particular content of your perception, failing to see the nature behind it, and certainly failing to recognize the enduring feeling in regard to it.
Yes, athletic meditation. How long can you sit?
Sure.
2 hours. Some guys can sit for 2 weeks.
Well, it's all based, as I said, it all revolves around trying to perceive, trying to catch, preying upon something. And that's why you would have to go through these specialized motions. Because if you walk too fast, you can't be catching something. So you must walk slowly, slow down, stand, and just look at it. Just grab it as it comes out. Recognize it, and that's it. And that's nothing else than meditating with that same sensuality that you're trying to overcome.
So if there's no unwholesome thoughts,